This story comes out of central Illinois. There was this man named Jack, and Jack said when he was younger, him and his friend were playing out in the woods. And he said they came across this pond in the middle of the forest. And he said when they got to the shoreline, they looked out and there was like a little island in the middle of the pond with a couple trees. Now Jack noticed his friend started getting like really nervous. And he said his friend was like, look, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. And he's like, why? What's wrong? And he's like, come on, we gotta leave. So his friend, took off and just started heading back into town. So he follows his friend and they go all the way back to his house. He goes inside and his friend tells his dad, like, hey dad, I found that place you were talking about with the pond and the island in the middle. And his dad was like, what? Are you guys okay? Like, is everything all right? And Jack's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And his dad's like, nothing. Just don't ever go back to that place. Don't ever go there. And he said like his dad would never talk about like why they shouldn't go there. So later on in life, Jack said he was about 25. And at this time he was living in his car. And he said, he would park at places around town, but he kept getting told to leave. So he remembered that spot out in the woods, that there was this little dirt road that would take you, far out into the woods, right by where this pond was. And he said, you know what? I bet I could park there, I could sleep there, and no one would disturb me. So he drives his car out to this spot. It's about 9-10 o'clock at night. Said he rolled down his window and he started smoking a cigarette. Well, he said all of a sudden, like a breeze of wind started to pick up, and he caught wind of this very bad smell. And he said it just smelled like, kind of like rotten eggs. And he said when the breeze would stop, the smell would stop. But as the breeze picked up, it would come back again. And he said after a while, he started hearing what he thought at the time were sounds of coyotes. And he said he just kept hearing like this howling sound. Well, he didn't think much of it, and he starts getting tired. So he gets in the back of his car and he puts a pillow down, puts a blanket over him, and he falls asleep. Well, he said, it was a really nice night. So he had the windows partly rolled down, letting the breeze in. And he said he just remembers waking up to this weird feeling on his ankle. And he said when he looked down, there was a hand that was covered in hair grabbing his leg. And he said when he looked up out the window, he could see the face of a wolf, but like a body of a hairy man. And he said there were two bright yellow eyes just staring at him. He said this thing grabbed his ankle and started trying to pull him out of the back of the car. He's screaming and yelling, trying to fight this thing and kicking as hard as he can. Finally, this thing lets up. He gets up to the front of the car and he starts the engine and he starts taking off. Well, he said this thing still had its arm in the window and he starts dragging it along the road with him, and it's trying to actually get inside the car. And then he said finally it just kind of broke off and it like rolled and then took off into the woods. And he said he, was like terrified. He's speeding down this dirt road, and he said all of a sudden he noticed standing on the side of the road up ahead, there was this woman with like long black hair. And he said she was just standing there staring at him driving by. And he said she was covered in some kind of white paint with these black markings all over her. And he said he just like, something about her just felt very, very off. But he kept driving and she just stared at him as he drove past. So he said, he got back into town and stuff, and he was pretty freaked out. He calls up his old friend that he had the experience with when he was younger, and he says, hey, that spot with the pond and the island out there? Like, why did you get so freaked out? And he goes, well, my dad said that there used to be like this satanic cult that lived there, and they would do all this, black magic ritual type stuff. And he said like strange stuff would happen in that area and people would disappear all the time. And he said when my dad was younger, he seen what he still swears to this day was a half man, half wolf.